it felt like home. Like I walked in there, I'm like, this is exactly where I want to be.
Cool. Let's kick it off. Today is January 27th, 2021. Who are we speaking with?
My name is Jayvi Velasco.
Where were you born and where do you live now?
I was born in Fort Ord, California, which is also known as Seaside because Fort Ord is no more. And I currently live in Brisbane, California. But if anybody asks, I just say San Francisco because it's a lot easier.
Describe house music in one word.
Love.
Unpack that.
I love house music. My life has evolved around it for 30 years now, and it's something I love to do, and the people I surround myself with that I care about also love it.
Describe the moment when you fell in love with house music.
Um, I would have to say it was around 1990 or 91. I was a senior in high school, and I had some older friends that were into house music. I had nothing. I knew nothing about it. They're like, "Oh, let's go to this club." It was a Thursday night. I was in high school. I still went anyway. It was Club Townsend in San Francisco, a very legendary club. My friends took me, and I danced all night. I mean, I this is when I was living in Pittsburgh, California, and nobody knew about house music where I lived. It was just all it was a hip hop town or a Bay Area rap dominated area, and I grew up listening to that. But there was just something about house that resonated with me.
Take us to school. How would you define soulful house music?
Basically, fast R&B, or just the modern equivalent to disco.
Love that. We want more education. Break down the San Francisco Bay Area house music community. Give us a little bit of the history from your perspective in terms of the clubs you went to that were influential in your life that meant something to you, and describe the current state of the scene prior to COVID.
That's that's a long question there, but I
Top it
would
up.
say, yeah, when I first started going, I was in high school. I would go to Club Townsend on Thursdays, as I mentioned earlier, and then from there, I would hit up all the different clubs I could that I knew were playing house, or even just like regular, more mainstream clubs, because I had friends that were into that. Um, Listen to the show called Yo Mama's House that was on um, the radio, and also at one point or another station, it was called the Underground Rave because the raves were big back then. And of course, I would go to raves as well because they were playing house music there. It wasn't really soulful or anything. Some DJs would, but it was a lot of different types of house and other electronic forms of music being played at these events, and some were small and some were like as big as 20,000 people. So Bay Area has a rich history of electronic music. Not necessarily a lot of soulful house, but it was there, and that's what I gravitated towards, and that's what I'm doing now. So
Talk to us about your evolution from being a fan to becoming a DJ.
um, it was pretty quick. I mean, I started going to the clubs in like 91. I had a friend from who was visiting his family here in the Bay Area, and he's originally from New York. He was a DJ and a graffiti artist. He played all kinds of music, but he always had like a lot of good house records. And he would just tell me about the house scene in New York. And he had to move back to New York eventually, but to get back, he had to sell his equipment, and I bought it. So for a graduation present, my mom gave me $500, and I bought 2 turntables, a mixer, and 2 full crates of house music records, you know, all New York stuff and a lot of imports. So that I had a really good jump start to being a DJ. But before I bought that stuff, I was just dabbling in it for a few months before that. But I would say I became serious about it once I bought the equipment when I was a senior in high school in '91. And this would be my 30th year anniversary as a DJ.
And do you remember your first paying gig?
My first paying gig was the summer of that same year after I got the equipment. I've been DJing for 2 months. Some of my friends heard I had DJ equipment. They're like, oh, you should DJ my homegirl's birthday party. I'm like, okay. I had no idea what I was doing, but I still did it. They weren't really into house, but I would play everything anyway back then, because when you're first coming up, you just want to play, and the music doesn't really matter that much. You just know you want to play in front of people, and that was sometime in July or August of 1991. And they gave me like $50. And back then, I had high school. That's like a few records at the store, so I took it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then, do you remember your first club gig?
I don't know. I mean, I was doing a lot of mobile DJ stuff, and then I kind of transitioned in a club. So I would say the first one where I say my name was on the flyer as a house DJ was probably sometime.
That's what I'm talking about.
In the mid '90s. And the party was called Sweet Sunday or something like that. There was like maybe 20 people there, but yeah, it was at a club called City Nights, which I eventually became a resident at. But this was a different one-off night that the guy throwing it I met at one of my mobile DJ gigs, and I was playing house, and he was like, oh, you play house? And, you know, he got my info, and then he hit me up when he decided to have that party.
Nice.
And yeah.
Talk to us about your DJing. How would you describe your DJ style?
I would say I try to draw on the energy of the crowd, but still be technically on point with the mixes as far as being on beat, being in key and whatnot. But when I was in college, I was studying film. It was part of our broadcasting program, and just learned the how films were edited and put together. And I would think I could apply that to DJing and tell the story that way. So I do consider DJing a form of storytelling, with just the basic concepts of building tension and releasing it. How many times you build a tension and release it throughout the night can vary. Sometimes it happens every 5-10 minutes. Sometimes that tension can build for half an hour to an hour, depending on how your crowd is and who's playing. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Which record never leaves your crate?
Which record never leaves the crate? It's probably more than a few of them, but I would say Ken Lu 3, What a Sensation, because that song just works with all different kinds of house, from soulful to techno to whatever. It just works with everything. I was watching a clip of me DJing like 7 years ago at Mighty, and I was playing that record, and I was like, damn, I play that record a lot. But it's very versatile. The B-sides, just the beats are, you could play with everything. It's like long, you could do long mix and it doesn't get repetitive. And then the A side just builds slowly but surely, and it's just an amazing record.
And then more about DJing. How do you organize your records? Do you have, for example, like section by classics and non-classics? Do you have like sections by MAW and Kerry Chandler? Do you have a section by like peak anthems and not peak anthems? Like, how do you?
I usually just put the records that sound the same or mix together well. I just put them together. Like, if I play a record one after the other, I'm like, oh, that sounded good together. I'll just move the other record there. But usually I'll organize the records by when I got them, or it's in constant flux. But I definitely have sections of stuff, but some of those sections go like 5 crates, some of them 1 crate. But it's pretty disorganized, to be honest. But I know where everything is, and that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Your preference, vinyl or digital?
Both. When I stream on Twitch, I have all vinyl show, and then I have another show that's all CDJs. So I just try to keep them separated. But I do love both. But there's just something special about playing all vinyl, because you can't fake it. And the records that you have to dig for. You can't just download it and get it right away. But with digital, there's things you could do that you absolutely cannot do on vinyl. And I try to embrace those things you can't do when I'm doing a digital set. But I try to keep it the same as far as my style, as keeping like playing smooth mixes and just building the tension and releasing it regardless of the format. It's really about the music, not the format, but there's still nothing like playing a vinyl set.
2-part question. Best part of being a DJ and worst?
Best part about being DJ is just playing music and having people that love what you play dance to it. Worst part is spending a lot of money on the music. But other than that, I mean, there isn't a lot of worst parts.
Knowing what you know now, how would you approach your DJ career differently, if at all?
Probably try to embrace learning how to play musical instruments early on to be able to produce records, because you have to have musical chops to produce music, and if not, you have to know people that do. So but I just wanted to play music, so like that the producing thing kind of went to the wayside. But I do understand and know how to do it. I have a degree as a recording engineer. I've done live sound, done sound in studios. But all of that was in the late 90s, where we didn't have the technology we have today. And right now I do have Ableton, and I've produced a few things here and there, but nothing I'm really super happy with, because I want it to be right. But I think every creative person goes through that, where they just feel like their stuff isn't good enough. So
more about DJing. How important is a DJ's residency in establishing their career? Or is it even relevant?
It may or may not be, depends on what they do with it. I mean, somebody could be a resident DJ at a strip club and nobody knows who they are outside of that club. Or you could be a resident at, like Shelter, and where it's like it can just be your whole career. It was built, and your reputation is built off of that residency. So I think it varies. I mean, early on, I had a residency at this club called City Nights in San Francisco from 95 to 97. It was like an open format commercial club, but they let me play house music in the back room and open up the main room playing mainstream stuff. So I'd get there, I'd play an hour and a half to 2 hours of mainstream stuff in the front room, and then just go over to the back bar and play another 4 hours of just house. So I learned a lot doing that. It wasn't the ideal club to get exposure for that, but it was definitely a meaningful experience playing those long sets for a different crowd of people every night. So
Compare and contrast the New York and San Francisco club scenes.
um I am going to be honest, I've never been to New York. I just know a lot about New York because I play a lot of the music I play is from New York. I hope that changes sometime in the future. I mean, the only experience I could draw is going to, say, the Shelter party at WMC, or going to like that like the Ian Friday libation party. That was probably the closest experience I would have to being inside a New York club, even though it was just people from everywhere. But I felt like it was more New York. And when I went to WMC for the first time, I just fell in love with house music all over again from going to those parties. So I'm like, there's more to house than what's in San Francisco. And I'm like, I need to get there again. And in San Francisco, the club scene varies. There's like so many different scenes, even within the genre of house or techno. I mean, the soulful house music scene in the Bay Area is actually, it's pretty small. But there's a tight knit group of people that go. I mean, but if you go to like a Burning Man party or like a All Day I Dream, there's like people listening to techno and minimal house and other types of electronic music. There's like tens of thousands of people at some of those things.
Let's go back to WMC. What is WMC for those that don't know?
It's the Winter Music Conference. Typically happens in March. I believe it started in the late 80s. But it started as a conference for music industry types, where they would go and meet other music industry type people to network. But after a while, it just evolved into like a spring break for the dance music scene. So everybody would just go there, from DJs to dancers to whoever, and just randoms in Miami for spring break. But yeah, I haven't been since 2010. But it was a great time. I would go again, but I wanted to experience other music festivals around the world before going back.
Describe the Shelter WMC party. What was that like? What did you see and what did you feel?
It felt like home. Like I walked in there, I'm like, this is exactly where I want to be. This vibe, this crowd, there were dope dancers everywhere, and everybody was respectful and mindful of the space. The music was amazing. Timmy Regisford fucking destroyed it. He was on one that night, and it's definitely an eye-opening experience for me when it came to Soulful House and how it could be played.
And then describe the Ian Friday libation party.
It was at a small spot, but the of course the music was dope. It was Sabine, Blazin, and Ian, and all of the Afro Mosaic Soul dancers were there, and it was it just felt like a house party with amazing music and amazing dancers. So it was before the shelter party, so it was just like a little taste of like what the New York scene has to offer. But yeah, it was fun.
What is Mikasa?
Mikasa is a holiday type music festival. It's put on by Julius the Mad Thinker and his sister Jennifer out of Chicago. So it's like a soulful house music festival that travels to different parts of the world. And I think their biggest party is in Playa del Carmen in Mexico, and I've had the chance to play for them a few times, I believe 3 times. But it's like a mini WMC, because you have people there from New York, San Francisco. I met people from Texas, from Europe. But yeah, it was definitely dope because all of the people were all at the same parties all at the time. Not like at WMC, everybody's just spread out and you happen to run into people. It was very organized and well curated as far as the music and the venues.
What is the West Coast Weekender?
The West Coast Weekender is put on by Oscar P. He's originally from New York, and his wife Jessica, and a few other people. I believe it's Chris Herrera and some other folks that put it together. I think the Soleil Crew's part of it as well. But it's another micro dance festival that happens in San Diego. This 2020 got canceled. I was supposed to go. But yeah, it's another event where they'll have one party during the day and then one party at night for 3 days, and it's all curated by the West Coast Weekender crew. But it's a pretty dope event because we don't have a lot of stuff like that here on the West Coast.
What is Soul Camp?
Soul Camp is a camp out and music, another micro music festival that's been going on for quite a while. Before it was a Renegade thrown by TJ Walton and Brian Salazar and a few of the other people from the Houseman crew here in the Bay. But it just kind of grew into something that was a little bit more organized, and they started having it at commercial campgrounds, and it's been going on every year since the early 2000s. I remember I've been to all of them, but there's been so many that I can't remember the exact day that it started, but I do remember the first one being some Renegade. You had to drive down this fire trail, and it was like pre-GPS, so we had to like write down the directions. You had to drive down this gravel trail and then reset your odometer and then turn left at like a certain mileage mark so you don't get lost. But it was pretty crazy early on, and then they got more organized and started bringing in talent from all over the world. So it's definitely a dope event here for California, but it's just all about camping and the music.
What is BFD?
BFD was or is a music festival put on by Live 105. I believe it stands for Big Fucking Deal. and that's at the Shoreline, I believe the Shoreline Amphitheater. But I played for them in one of their tents or booths in 1995, and that was one of the first times I played like a huge music festival like that. It was interesting because nobody knew nobody knew the music I was playing, but I was just happy to be there.
Tell us about your Twitch live sets. How often do you do them? When do you do them? What can fans expect to hear when you're playing live?
Well, because of the pandemic, like couldn't DJ anywhere, so I had to stream somewhere, and doing it on Facebook and Instagram wasn't really viable because they would cut you off after a certain time if their algorithm caught some sort of copyrighted music. So I just started doing it on Twitch back in April, and I steadily do Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 5 p.m. Pacific time and go till around midnight. And on Tuesday nights, I play all vinyl, and then Friday nights I use CDJ. So it's concentrate on more new stuff and using CDJs. And did I miss any part of that question there?
Nope, that's perfect. That's perfect. Talk to us about advice. What advice would you give the next generation of DJs?
Well, the next generation of DJs are going to need a different social skill set if they want to make it. But if you won't, and I think they all learn that at an early age because they're on social media and promoting themselves, TikTok, Snapchat, IG, what have you. But it's always a good skill to have to learn how to mix by ear, of course, and mixing on vinyl. But I know it's a lot of people don't have the equipment or the time to learn how to do that. But I would say if you want credit as a DJ from the earlier generations, you should probably know how to do that and have that in your bag there. But everybody's path is going to be different, so do what works for you. Just don't fake it.
Let's talk about memories. Two-part question. Tell us a time where you went to hear a DJ set where the DJ turned it the fuck out and you're like, this is why I'm into house music. And the same thing when you heard a live performer. Where they just said it.
I mean, going back to that Shelter WMC party when Timmy Regisford, that opened my eyes a lot, even though I've been DJing when I went to the party, I had already been DJing about 15, 16 years, but I never really left the Bay. So that blew my mind. And as far as a artist, I mean, one person that I can think of blowing my mind was Dave Brubeck. Before he passed away, I mean, the company I work for at my day job, we had a Christmas party, and they booked Dave Brubeck for our Christmas party, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, this guy's a living legend, and all my coworkers like, who the fuck is this guy? I'm like, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to hear a jazz music legend. And I was totally blown away by that. And then he passed away shortly after. So I was fortunate I got to see it in such an intimate setting like that, even though the people there had no idea what they were witnessing.
Give us a little bit of history. In New York, there are certain clubs that really define the city and define the scene. So, everything from the Paradise Garage to Shelter to Body and Soul to 718 Sessions. Give us that same education. If you were to say in the annals of San Francisco house music history, are there certain key clubs that stand out for you that are really special in your heart for defining the scene for you?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the 177 Townsend.
Mhm.
That had a huge influence. But, of course, there were other clubs in San Francisco, like DNA Lounge. You had a party called Remedy in the late 90s and early 2000s, which they played a lot of soulful house and a lot of clubbier house, but it was more on the soulful side. So that was a fun party. And then moving into the later 2000s, I would have to say the People Party in Oakland was very influential. Those were my homies, Callie, DJ Cecil, Amy, and then Brandon Brown and Hey Love. They did that party, and they just played the music they wanted to hear, and it happened to be the same music I liked as well. So that was an amazing era in music here in the Bay. That particular party, just kind of upset that it's no longer here. And I'm sure there's some I'm missing. Of course, parties at the end up. David Harness's party is like Taboo, Universe, Deviate. I mean, I can go on and mention different clubs and promoters, but I don't think I could remember them all.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That gives us a picture and a painting, a sketch of what the scene is. Those are the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else you want to talk about that'll help people understand your DJing or specifically the San Francisco scene?
Well, the San Francisco scene is very diverse. I'm sure if you're into something, you will find it. if you look hard enough. If not, if you can't find it, you have to create it and manifest it. So that's something I try to do when I play, because I feel like I'm a little bit of an outlier when it comes to the San Francisco scene, because my music is a little bit more East Coast style. Of course, there's people like David Harness, Patrick Wilson, Nina Soul, and the homie Koflo. But that's just a small handful of people. There's not like a huge community of us, but it's something I love to do. As you mentioned earlier, describe house, and I said love, and it just comes back to that.
Is there anyone you'd like to collaborate with? If you would say, okay, a dream DJ bill, you and somebody else playing at WMC or Mikasa, West Coast Weekend, or a Soul Camp, like
I don't know, like Louis Vega, the Body and Soul guys, Kenny Dope, Spinna, of course. I mean, there's so many. The DJ Spen, of course, Patrick Wilson here, David Harness, my boy Koflo, and so many. But I've had the opportunity and have been fortunate enough to play with a lot of these people. Not all of them, but a few of them. Just been an amazing ride, and I still got a long way to go.
One more question about the San Francisco scene. So I what shocked me was that clubs here close at 2 a.m., which meant my experience was at 1 a.m. the lights go on, and then at 1:30 it's like last call, and they're kind of winding it up. Describe the scene in terms of how, because clubs close so early compared to New York, how do you manage your DJ set, and then what happens after the hang?
Well, they stopped serving alcohol at 2. There are some clubs that can still stay open, but the clubs that shut down around that time, they usually start earlier, like around 9 or 10. You just have to calibrate for that. So starting early helps. One thing that I have done is do after hours parties. So after these clubs close, you have another party to go to. And, I've been known for that as well. That's, the party that I did called After Hours with a couple of other people, Kevin and Eric and Mocha. I don't know if you know these people, but we did that after hours party for a long time.
Where was it?
It was in the Mission in San Francisco. It was at this really small photography studio, but the people that ran it had us do our party there once a month, and it ran for quite a long time. We had some really good parties, even though the place only fit 50 people.
And then tell us about your residencies that you had in the Bay Area, besides that party.
Of course, there were city nights. I had another Friday night party at this small bar called Wish. I was basically a soul camp resident when they had it. Not officially resident, but if they had it, I was playing. I was somewhat a resident at this party called Throwback, which was all vinyl classic house music night at Mighty. And, most of my experience have been one-offs, where I was the guest or whatever, anything in between, being the opener, headliner, guest DJ, impromptu set. It's just so many I can't remember.
It's all good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Moima.
All right. Thanks. Have a good day.
Likewise.
All right. Bye-bye.